Timba, timba, timba heavy load. Timba, timba, timba heavy load. Timba, timba, timba heavy load. Timba, timba, timba heavy load.
Oh, timba broka me paketi maya. Timba broka me paketi maya. Oh, timba broka me paketi maya. Oh, timba broka me paketi maya. Oh, timba drapa me hipeti maya. Oh, timba drapa me hipeti maya.
Timba, timba, timba heavy load. Timba, timba, timba heavy load. Timba, timba, timba heavy load. Timba, timba, timba heavy load.
Oh, timba drapa me futeti maya. Oh, timba drapa me futeti maya. Timba drapa me paketi maya.
Timba, timba, timba heavy load. Timba, timba.
I can't take it no more. Can't take it no more. Imagine 18 hours of blackout, and you're telling people progress. Cost of living gone up 100%, yet you give public servant less. Mr. President, listen to the people, so just hold and you will confess. I want you try surviving on the public base, then you're going to over stress. Cause I done fed up, you done fed up, he done fed up, she done fed up, we done fed up, the people fed up. You're hiding corruption inside the cup, look how evil set up. The people fed up. They don't drive no fear with the citizen. They may want the people speak out. Freedom of speech done gone inside the gutter. Knock off when you open your mouth. Discrimination in entertainment, and you're talking about one Guyana. When the Ministry of Culture keep the big shows, one set of girls and manner. Cause I done fed up, you done fed up, he done fed up, she done fed up, we done fed up, the people fed up. They hide the corruption inside the cup, look how evil set up. The people fed up.
All right. Hey, good night and welcome to Straight Up. It's Monday. It's Monday, the 16th day of December. The 16th day of December, which means it's going. And just like everything else is going, cost of living going up and up, frustration, people headaches, up and up. The government or the so-called government of Guyana just grabbing people's lands, taking away people's lands, insulting people, the racism, every single thing is rampant in that country. Every single thing. Bodies are showing up dead. People are dropping dead at the police station, according to a report just came out of Guyana. A man collapsed, quote unquote, collapsed and died at the Albertown police station. Another resident from Albertown, a 52-year-old guy, collapsed and died in Albertown as well. A body of some guy found on the seashore somewhere on the East Coast. every single day. Every single day. I don't know what's going on in Guyana. You guys have got to tell us what's happening in Guyana. A bunch of our indigenous brothers and sisters, all the way from Region 2, miraculously, they turned up in Georgetown. According to information, mind you, they were told by Muhammad. I don't know why Irfan Ali doesn't like to be addressed as Muhammad. 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 Nothing is wrong with having a name. Why is Irfan Ali running away from Muhammad? Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. Why? It is your religion. He's supposed to be a Muslim. Nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with Muhammad. But why is he ashamed of his first name, Muhammad? Our guest, Lincoln Lewis, his middle name is Brandon. He's not afraid of Lincoln Brandon Lewis. Then we have another guest. Audriana Thomas is with us this evening as well. She's not afraid or ashamed to mention to people that her first name is Audriana. I am not afraid or ashamed to tell you guys that my name is not Balram, sorry. My name is Mark. I thought for a moment of the Prime Minister of India, Modi, said that Guyana is like a mini India. So I might as well just change my name to Balram and don't call me Vishnu or something like that. Okay, I am bringing all of them on because they are smiling already. It's not a smiling matter. We have Audriana Singh, we have Leland Bharat, and we have Lincoln Sogdeo. Good night, lady and gentlemen. Welcome to Straight Up. We have lots of serious things to talk about. But before we welcome them, let me just say this, according to the Village Voice, is a breaking news story. And this was earlier today. A breaking news story. Guess what? This is the breaking news. A two-show found dead in a hotel in Georgia. We don't know the circumstances, but as of now, the police, they're claiming that they have a suspect. And this is kind of like, in my opinion, it's kind of like fishy. You know what they're saying, and it's fishy. Something ain't right about what's happening here. And I hope Irfan Ali, Jogdeo, and all those folks in the PPP that have been attacking these folks in the indigenous community, I hope they are prepared to answer questions and not to have whomever the police, that is, claim is a suspect. I hope that suspect doesn't turn up dead somewhere so that this murder will go unanswered, just like the other murders in Guyana, whether it's Paper Shards or whomever. Anyways, I noticed the former Minister of State says here, demands justice and security for Tushars following the death of Ridley Joseph. Following the death of Ridley Joseph. All right, we can talk much more about that, but quickly, before we go to our guest, these individuals again, 40 Venezuelan Waro Amerindians left stranded in Georgetown after they were sent to Georgetown to seek assistance. When they got to Georgetown, government or so-called government didn't get time with them. Kwame, sorry, I know Adriana is going to laugh when I say Kwame turned up on the scene and booed the people, chased the people, insulted the people, and all manner of things. And that is what's happening in Guyana at this time. Let me welcome our guests. First of all, let me welcome the lone female in this group tonight, Audriana Thomas. Good night and welcome to Straight Up. How are you?
Good night, Mark, and thank you. I'm doing good and very good, or I should say good enough.
Yep, thank you. I'm glad that you've accepted this invitation. At the last moment, I must let our listeners know, Lincoln Lewis, good night, and Leland Aubrey, Saul. Good night, gentlemen. How are you?
Good night, Mark. Good night. Looking forward for great times.
Thank you
Is this
so
show
much.
going to be a 1 hour, 1.5 or 2 hours?
Whatever Adriana says, since this is her first time on Straight Up, I believe. What it's not?
Yes, this is my first time. 2 hours. We have a lot to talk about.
Ah, okay. So tell us, and if members of our audience, if they agree that it's 2 hours, well, I guess, that's I have no other choice. Um, Give us a brief background. Adriana Thomas, I know you're no stranger to a lot of Guyanese, but for those who have been living in the US for over 150 something years, give a brief background of who Adriana Thomas is.
Okay, so I'm a development practitioner, a sustainable development practitioner, and a rule of law advisor. And I've worked in development for over 20 years, community development, international development at the international level, at national level, regional level. And so my background is in development, governance, rule of law, environment, climate change, and water sanitation and hygiene, etc. And in addition to that, I have a particular interest in the discussion tonight from a rule of law perspective. Rule of law for development in terms of human rights, in terms of the natural rights of the Guyanese people, which are being challenged by the amendments to this legislation. And also, I'd like to focus on development and governance, because there are some very important developmental components to land as it relates to African Guyanese.
Thank you so much. Well said. I'm glad that Leland Aubrey Saul is picking up with his camera and so forth. Just pull your camera, come a little closer to your camera so we wouldn't be able to be distracted, or some members of the audience wouldn't be distracted if you bring your camera closer to you, because according to Adriana Thomas and Lincoln Lewis, we're going for 2 hours tonight, and we won't want much distraction there, please. Former lieutenant of the Lieutenant Colonel. I know you always correct me, but good night, and how are you doing tonight, sir? Leland
Good
Aubrey.
night, Mark. I am doing fairly okay. Of course, I'm concerned about the issue that we will be discussing tonight, because it has a lot of implication for us, and especially Afro-Guyanese. And I trust that we will have a fruitful discussion, and so we can charter the way forward.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Lincoln Lewis, General Secretary of the Guyana Trades Union Congress. You're ready to rock and roll. You said 2 hours. The audience are basically, I don't know, where's our other guest disappearing? We'll have to talk to him about the disappearing act. Get up, go away, come back, as we say in the countryside.
I'm just adjusting the light inside the room.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. It's Straight Up 107.1 FM. Let's begin first of all. I want to ask Ms. Adriana Thomas about this latest report about these folks, 40 Venezuelan Warao Amerindians. They were sent to Georgetown. They're stranded in Georgetown. They claim that they were sent by members of the quote-unquote government. What is your take on all of these things happening right now in Guyana?
I think, Mark, I haven't read this report here. I didn't read this report before now, but I think this is a part of a wider approach to governance in our society. And I think the government has dropped the ball in many instances. And they've dropped the ball at the institutional level. They've dropped the ball at the community level. They've dropped the ball at the I would say the central executive level. They've dropped the ball at the parliamentary level. And these are some of the things that we're going to talk about more tonight, specific to the bill that's coming up. But these things should not happen. A lot of what is happening in Guyana should not happen if the government had focused on strengthening our institutions. For example, this is a matter that the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security should have been had some kind of system in place. I'm saying a functional system in place to address the issues as it relates to the migrants. I know that they do have a program to support the migrants, but the situations like these ought not to occur if that system is functioning effectively. And so this is one. The second aspect of this here is, as it relates, I'm particularly concerned about the children and the circumstances under which the children are. Women also, but particularly the children. And in many of these instances, we see children, they're exposed. These children are essentially exposed. And so there's a broader problem with this government as it relates to having strong, effective, functioning institutions. And part of the inefficiencies in the institutions is because the government is very, this government is very, they micromanage. They invade, they do not allow for creativity and innovation and independence at the level of the institution. So I guess for this matter to be resolved, somebody has to call the minister or the permanent secretary. If the system is working, then it does not have to, a situation like this does not have to wait until the permanent secretary or the minister calls somebody to say, address this matter.
Well said there, Adriana Thomas, taking the opening batting of the first line of questions. Many of you probably haven't read this as yet. Go to the Village Voice maybe after the show, and you'll see 40 Venezuelan Amerindians are actually currently stranded in Georgetown. They were invited by this installed PPP regime. They were left stranded there. Lincoln, your take, please, on this current situation, according to Village Voice News.
Let me say to you that with the government, current government, there's an absence of a clear policy to deal with nearly every issue. Every issue that turns up, it is so much fraught with party politics. What mileage the ruling party can make from it. It is not what is necessary for those who are involved. It is what the party can galvanize. Because they're always in what we call election mood campaigning. Nobody knows what the policy for that exists to deal with these migrants. Nobody knows how much money they receive from the UN per year, or what assistance they get from other institutions to assist with these migrants. I believe there is an international office in Georgetown, usually Carmichael Street, that deals with migrants. I don't know what's the relationship, and I don't believe that there is what we call a cohesive working relationship to address the plight of these people. Notwithstanding that, I believe that as citizens we have a right to know what is taking place, and we need to get involved, and we need to make our voices be heard. Because Guyanese migrate to various parts of the world, and I expect that wherever you go, as a human being, your rights must be respected. And in this specific case here, my understanding from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is that the issue of those 40 plus people, their rights have been disrespected.
Well said.
Call on the government to address this with some degree of alacrity within the confines of the international conventions and laws.
Thank you so much, General Secretary of the Guyana Trades Union Congress. One of the things that Ms. Adriana Thomas mentioned is there are kids out there, and no child has to go through this sort of thing at all. And for those of us, it's very close to our heart. I'm looking at that little girl there. She's almost probably the same age as my daughter. She's probably about maybe 5, 6, or 7. And she's currently, along with other little kids, in the streets of Georgetown. According to the father, or a gentleman, they were all invited by the government of Guyana to go to Georgetown. And as they got there, they are now stranded. I saw a video where Kwame McCoy was there. He sucked up his teeth, the usual antics, twist up his hands, and he jumped in the taxpayer's vehicle and left. Shame on that individual. Now, Mr. Leland Aubrey Saul, what's your take on this latest development, sir?
Mark, it is clear, it is obvious that government has no clear policy to address the issues confronting the Venezuelan migrants. And we must ask ourselves, what level of coordination is there between the United Nations International Office for Migration? I think there are other NGOs, international NGOs that are working in Guyana. And we are unaware of the level of coordination between central government and those agencies. I cannot understand the reason why those migrants would have been invited to come to Georgetown for what? Had we had clear policies, all the institutional mechanism and the systems would have been in place to address the concerns of the migrants in Region 1. And generally, as it relates to the Venezuelan migrants, we need a clear policy to deal with the migrants. I personally do not have anything against the Venezuelan, but we need to monitor them to decide where they go, and so you can properly administer their welfare. Throughout this country, you have scores of Venezuelans in every single region as you go across this country. Not only in Region 1, I want to make it quite clear, not only indigenous people. And I want to believe that government is complicit in some cases in the exploitation of the migrants. And we have a right to protect people. They have basic rights that must be protected. And we must not use their situation to exploit them for economic reason or for political mileage, as we see the current regime is doing. I therefore call upon government to implement a robust migration policy to protect all migrants from unnecessary exploitation. And if what is reported is true, how the minister McCoy treated the migrants, I think we ought to condemn McCoy's behavior. That is unacceptable. You do not treat people who are vulnerable in that manner. Thank you.
Indeed, you do not treat people, vulnerable people, in that manner. But we cannot be surprised, and I'm sure that Ms. Adriana Thomas is not surprised, Lincoln Lewis is not surprised. All of our listeners, or 99% of our listeners, aren't surprised at all. And you mentioned, Mr. Saul, if in fact that individual, Kwame McCoy, did that to the people, we are not on this show about propaganda. We do not come here to spread propaganda or to basically hype people up without any evidence. Now let's go straight to the evidence, please, our operator. And you'll see Kwame McCoy, people address him as a minister, but I just don't. Kwame McCoy, this is what happened moments ago.
I am sorry. No, I'm saying to you, that post was made before it came to us. It was before you came. The people need help. Can we just help them? Right, go ahead.
Nigel Hughes and the AFC said he helped that.
We agree with what he is saying. You're the minister. You shouldn't go away.
Which minister?
No, he is the minister. He should go away.
Nigel Hughes and the AFC said that they're going to help them. Jumped in taxpayers' vehicle and sped away. I know we have other issues to deal with, but this is also important. What's going through your mind there, Ms. Thomas?
Mark, now that I see that video, I'm very disappointed with Minister McCoy's behavior. And I think that as we have this discussion, I think the time has come as Guyanese for us to start letting the government know that your standards are below what is accepted. The time has come for us to demand that our leadership reflect our values. And there was a time when a minister would have gone there, irrespective of which party he is from, and he would have operated with a certain level of standard. But for the minister to go there as a minister, the minister has a responsibility. The purpose of the government is to uphold the rights of citizens and to uphold the humanity of people. That's if we to put the purpose of the government into one sentence. And so the minister completely misunderstood his purpose for going out there, because Nigel Hughes is not in government. So what he did, he brought the politics into an issue where the politics was not relevant. Nigel Hughes, as the leader of the Alliance for Change, he is in the opposition, and the opposition role is to hold the government accountable, is to ensure that the government do what they're supposed to do properly. So if Nigel Hughes say that the AFC will help the people, that is what he's supposed to do. He's in the opposition. But the minister, as a representative of the government, as a representative of the people of Guyana, as a representative of the state of Guyana, there was an issue there, and the minister, in his capacity as a minister, went out there, and the minister acted totally inappropriately. And so the government should then send the minister who is going to fulfill their duties under the circumstances, because Minister Kwame McCoy certainly missed it. And so I think the time has come for us as a people of Guyana. They say the people get the government that they deserve. Well, this is behavior that we certainly must say we don't deserve this behavior. And we must start to demand from the government a higher level of operation, from the president coming all the way down. We must start to demand that the values of our leaders, the conduct, the behavior of our leaders, particularly in their professional life, but also to some extent in their private life, reflects our values. And so we're not asking them to be perfect, but we're certainly asking them to be professional and to conduct the business of the state at the highest level of professionalism. And so I think what the government needs to do at this point is to send, if Minister Kwame McCoy does not want to fulfill his duties in this instance, send another minister who is going to reflect the level of professionalism that is required under the circumstances.
Well said, Lincoln. I'm not sure that we're going to make it for the 2 hours. I noticed what's happening there, but what's your take on what you just heard from
let me say, you know, I've made a point already. It's a question of policy, and it goes beyond policy. It's a question of roads. What is happening here now is that in everything, let me just backtrack a minute. The chief executive officer for every ministry is the permanent secretary. But you don't see the permanent secretaries any longer, who are the people who ought to be administering and see the implementation of programs and those type of things. You now see a minister who comes forward every time. What they attempt to do is to usurp the authority that is vested in the office of the permanent secretary and the officers. So what he don't understand what his role is, that he needs to sit down at a certain level and see and make sure that the policies are conceptualized and developed. And the permanent secretary and the staff will seek to implement those plans and programs. They want to be in everything. They want to be making the policies, implementing the policies and programs, because their only mission is not to deliver service to the people, but to say to the people that whatever the people receive in the country, they are granting them a favor. We have to come to terms and understand that is what these guys are all about. That's why Kwame find himself there. He don't know what to do. But what he's going, because he don't know what to do, he's going to use the authority and the power that is vested in his office, not only to humiliate the people who are there, but to cuss out somebody else, some other politician. You know, everything that this government does, and they stump their toes, or they fall down and bruise the knee or the elbow, the first thing they say, somebody else do it. They never take responsibility for anything. And that's what Kwame is doing tonight. He's making sure that that the government don't take responsibility.
Well,
He can't throw it on the permanent secretary, so he throw it on the opposition. We have to hold these guys accountable. We have to hold every government in this country. They must be held accountable. Everybody who gets paid, who was an elected office and has been paid from a state coffer, must be held accountable. And until such time that we start doing that, we are going to get the Kwames, the Hamiltons, and the others.
Thank
We will
you.
get them.
And the others, including the others indeed. Mohammed, Irfan, the butcher from Unity, and so forth. Briefly, Mr. Saul, your take on what you just heard there or you saw on that video.
I want to support the point that was made by Ms. Thomas and also Lincoln's point. Policy formation, it is the responsibility of the executives to formulate policies. But we must ask ourselves if they understand policy formation. And clear policies would allow government to address certain issues. And rightfully, as Lincoln mentioned, policy implementation is a bureaucracy that implements policy. And the whole issue of Ms. Thomas's point about values, we must ask ourselves, what are our national values? Do we have? And when you look at the diamond ball, you can understand what is going on in this country. What is it we value? And so you have a minister going out there who does not understand that he is a servant of people And he go there and he's very arrogant as usual. You know, I believe that our ministers and those who represent us in parliament and so on, they must be of a certain quality and a certain stock. They must have decorum. They must understand how to conduct themselves. You know, he's being paid by the state. He has a responsibility. So he went there and maybe he's angry that Mr. Hughes interact with the people, right? And every single situation this administration is using to gain political mileage. And that is what we have, a bunch of incompetent and arrogant people. And we as a people must deal with that situation. We cannot allow these careless people who don't care about the citizens to continue to govern this country. And we must get rid of them by legitimate means. We must do it. And hence we are here tonight to discuss a very important issue. I know, yes, what we are looking at, the situation with the migrant is very, very important, but we see that they're incapable of handling this situation. And we know why. And I have deep suspicion why those migrants were invited to Georgetown. I have deep suspicion why they invite them to Georgetown. And they know why.
Yep. And certainly, thank you, Mrs. Salt. They know why. They know exactly why. We're going to hear something different tomorrow. But nobody's surprised at Kwame's antics. And Ms. Thomas spoke, and you just mentioned quality people must be in public office.
Mark, quickly.
And
Mark,
Kwame McCoy doesn't fit that description. Has been expelled, kicked out, or deported, what they call it, from a small island, allegedly for prostitution. His visa was revoked as a result of allegations of him soliciting sex from an underage schoolboy. Lots of other stuff. So let us not be surprised at the antics of that individual. Sorry, Ms. Thomas. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, there is a fundamental behavioral problem in this government. And before, among our elected leaders, this problem was more the exception than the norm. I think what we have seen in particularly this PPC government from 2020, this kind of behavior has become the norm. We see the judges make a decision and the attorney general comes out in the public and views them out. Let me use that word. The attorney general came out, views out Justice Kissoon, views out the Justice Persaud, and for making a decision. And we have never seen an attorney general prior to this attorney general come into the public domain and view the judges. And so it's a behavioral problem. We see the vice president every Thursday. He holds a press conference, refers to our female member of parliament as low life. We have never seen that behavior before. And I have not, as a woman, I have not had a chance to publicly voice my disappointment in the vice president for that, right? Although it happened a while ago. And I'm saying to the vice president, respect us as women. Respect our women leaders, now that I have the opportunity to say it. We see the president conduct himself in ways in which it's totally unacceptable. It's almost like, and then we see the minister of culture. We saw how the minister of culture treated the artists and the behavior. So this has become, and the reason why we need to talk about it, it is not an exception anymore. It has become the norm. And it has become the norm because the government feels, or the people in the government feels, that it's about value. And it's about the value that they have placed on us. But we must say to them, and begin to say to them, starting from tonight if we have to, that we will no longer accept this behavior in public office. We will no longer, we must no longer accept this kind of behavior in public, particularly since it has become the mainstream behavior in this government here. We must demand a higher level of behavior. Last point on this is that we all have a higher self and a lower self. This government has chosen to govern in their lower self. And by governing in their lower self, what they have done, we as citizens, we now have to respond in our lower selves. And I would like to make this point in support of Richard here. The vice president comes out there every single week. And the vice president focuses, this is a vice president of a country that is, I see Guyana is the fastest growing country in this part of the Western Hemisphere. And the vice president has the time to, in a specific way, in a particular way, focus on Rickford Burke in a way that it's almost predatory. And I want the vice president to know that he has to stop going after Rickford Burke, because it is unacceptable. It is a violation of his rights. It is a violation of what he's doing. He's trying to dehumanize, strip him of his integrity, strip him of his dignity. And I'm saying, stop it. Not just Rickford Burke, Mark, you and Melly Mel. Now that I have this mic, I'm going to say that. So I'm saying to the vice president that what you call influencers, Mark, must be able to speak and share his views. Rickford Burke must be able to share his views, and Melly Mel, etc. And I'm saying to the vice president, what I would like to know is, what is the national development policy for Guyana? This new law amendment bills to the Land Acquisition Act, the amendments. What we would like to know is, how does this fit, these amendments fit into the national development program? That's what we want to know on Thursday. Mark, I'm just getting started.
Oops, and I was just about to wrap up, but you're now getting started. Don't get me started either, because we'll go all night. Maybe after midnight right here on 107.1 FM. You mentioned the quality that we now see in these chaps who are sitting there at the office of the president, and this came to mind. Quite embarrassing.
How we gonna do a bowling man walk right now? You ready? Fuck, so let me go now. Hear me sing now. Bowling walk, bowling walk, bowling walk, bowling walk, truck, bowling walk, bowling walk, bowling walk, bowling.
And before we get back
there and fabricate that, unless you say who the person is, I can't comment on anonymous people.
Okay, well, let's talk about specific individuals. What is your relationship with Mr. Su Jurong?
All right, we understand what that relationship is, but you're correct. The quality of these so-called leaders every week is views out. But at the end of the day, we've got to do better. And the only time we can do better is elections time. We have to discuss the land issue, because the current installed regime, they want to steal ancestral lands, particularly from persons of African descent. We see what they're doing on a daily basis. And now they have laws now, or they're about to pass a bill so that they can legally go after and just take away people's lands. This is what is happening. But before we get to that, let's remind people of this. This is not a now come something. This was brought to your attention not so long ago, and Lincoln and the situation at Kingley. This is what happened, and Anil was hell-bent on changing the law.
I you back me. I don't knock me. Call the police. I don't have any problem with that. Call the police. Call the police.
My grandfather.
You grandfather? You fucking grandfather bring anything here? Leave it. I said leave it. I said stop it. Stop it. Watch it. This ball belongs to me. Dummy. Do you walk? Do you walk? Big man, what wrong with you? What wrong with you? What wrong with you? That Paul belongs to me. I survey this land. That Paul belongs to me. But bring a paper and things, bring a paper and things. You bring your paper. You bring your paper. Bring your paper.
I get my paper.
Bring it.
Yeah, you bring yours. You bring.
All right, so that's what's happening now, and it takes us to this here land acquisition. The PPP regime is going after ancestral land. Let us begin with Lincoln Lewis. What's your take on this whole land acquisition bill that is going to be introduced in Parliament maybe on Wednesday or Thursday of this week? What is your take? What's happening? And why is it that the PPP regime is hell-bent on just grabbing ancestral lands? What's happening?
Let me say to you that they decide already that they're going to be taking some people land, and in doing so, they are going to pass those lands on to some friends and cronies of theirs. Let us look back on what was done at Moko Akeda, where they claim that the road has to be, those lands that run along that road, that they remove those people who were living there. Those lands are now assigned to some developers who may be friends or cohorts of the current administration. What is happening right now is that they are using the law now because you have had public outcry and they were stopped by the court on the issue of the Peter Dahl, that they want to take control of persons' property there. When they had paid some people market prices or even beyond the market price for their land, and the other persons, they want to pay them something far below the market price. When this government selling things to people, I will remind you of something, an experience I had. I was on the privatization board some years ago. And every property that comes there, they look for the highest bidder. And the highest bidder has to be within the range of what the market price is. And I remember one specific thing where there was a farm, a dairy farm on the West End. And a proposal came to the board for this farm to be handed over to some man came from Scotland for $1 US. But every Guyanese who looked for something, nearly all of them had to pay market price for the property. It is a scheme that this government is involved in, that they're going to move to, they're going to get the opportunity since the court stopped them from paying peanuts to those persons at Peter's Hall. They are using that as a guise now to go to the National Assembly to say that this is about paying people for market value for their property. It is not paying the market value, it's about how we can give you comfort to take away people's property and hand it to somebody else. And it's a serious situation. And this do not stop while we want to talk about the issue of ancestral land. It may not stop there. It's every Guyanese will have to be concerned about their property. What the government will do about confiscating and passing it on to their comrades at a price. You remember the World Cup, the first World Cup that came here? Remember that when they were building the stadium and they want to build hotels? when some people invested in hotels with the expectation when they meet to a certain point they would have been helped by the government. They were never helped. But there are other people who build hotels and they were helped in all forms to make sure that hotels come into shape. And in some cases, they were sold after. And the people who built those hotels receive subsidies from the government or subvention from the government to complete. But they also receive market value when they sold those hotels. So they make money off of the taxpayers and they make money off of the market value. So we have to be concerned and we need to look at what we're doing and we need to collaborate to make sure that we don't get conned and the government don't run a ruler over us.
Well said, Lincoln Lewis. Collaboration indeed. Ensure that we do not get conned or the government take advantage of the people, which is what is happening right now. There must be a nationwide pushback of this, a nationwide pushback. Take a look at this. Irfan Ali, acres upon acres of lands on the east, the Soestdijk Linden Highway. Nobody's going to go and grab that, but they were able to take lands for themselves and enjoying it. Well, let's move over to Adriana. Adriana, can you give your take, please, on this land acquisition bill that's about to be passed? Your microphone, please. Sorry.
Legislations are enacted to facilitate government policy. And so we have to ask ourselves why. The government has a policy of not doing poverty reduction, but wealth creation, or we can say unequal wealth creation. So this legislation here will allow, if this should pass, it would allow the government to continue on with a policy of inequitable wealth creation. And so there are two aspects of that, of the amendments, which are very important. One is where it states that if once the proper, the minister proof of ownership, or the proof of ownership is shown to the minister and the minister is satisfied, then the minister can make the payment. This bill, these amendments, they have caught the African-Guyanese community off guard. I say that because many African-Guyanese, they have for decades lived on the property, their grandmother property, their great-grandmother property, their great-great-grandfather's property, and they never sought to update the ownership. So, but they have a lot of land. So I believe that the government this bill here is as a result of intelligence that the government has. The government has intelligence. Whenever the government is well informed. So when you see a bill like this is when there's something else or there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes. So let's look at what's going on behind the scenes. The government has intelligence. They have knowledge that Black people have a lot of lands. You may look at these lands and think that the lands are there, they're lying there, they're not being used. The other aspect is that the government is building roads and they're opening up new lands. So I believe the government is developing a scheme, like Lincoln said, as to how they can find a way to easily access some of these new lands which are being opened up as a result of these roads, as well as a lot of the lands which they see African-Guyanese have, or Guyanese on the whole, and how they can get these lands. And so they came up with this bill. While yes, people are linking it to what happened in court when with the Providence matter, where the judge asked the government to provide the agreements for the other people who were paid, and the government has not provided those agreements, but they are going to appeal the matter. So there's a view that these amendments are as a result of that matter before Justice Kisun in terms of the Peters Hall matter. But there's also a wider position from the government standpoint. So these amendments will allow the government then to access lands, or to acquire lands rather, in an easier way. What the bill has not, what needs to be done is for a comprehensive legislation. These lands, particularly we deal with African-Guyanese lands and ancestral lands. African-Guyanese need the government to assist them with some kind of regulations, system, procedure to help them to upgrade the ownership of these lands. And so this legislation here it would make life easier for the government, but not necessarily for the landowners. The other point which I'm going to build on later in the program is land for African Guyanese in the development context. This is the last thing that African Guyanese have to, in a fast way, move them out of or reduce poverty and move them into the middle class. But the government has, over the years, African Guyanese are shut out, particularly from 2020, from the market economy. They're shut out from the state economy. The market economy, for example, African Guyanese do not make up most of the private sector. They're not the big business people. Neither do they have all of the ownership in the private sector and businesses, etc. And in the state economy, as it relates to contracts, African Guyanese, many of them do not have the equipment to qualify, for example, major road projects and other infrastructural projects. So they're shut out from the market economy largely. They're shut out from the state economy largely. What African Guyanese can use their land for is to develop a vibrant social economy. So what this bill here is trying to impede is the ability of African Guyanese to now develop this social economy as a way of reducing poverty and improving, moving them up to the middle class. And I'll build on these points later.
Thank you so much. We go right over to Leland Aubrey-Saul. Your take on this land acquisition bill that is set to be introduced in Parliament. We're hoping that the entire country is going to stand up against this, stand up against and have a pushback and refrain the government from ever passing such a bill. Your take, sir.
Mark, this bill, I trust that it does not pass. It is designed to further weaken African Guyanese. I would be very candid and blunt. We understand the situation in the African villages. Our forebears, they die intestate, and in many cases, those lands are in their names. We see the situation at Kingley, where Lincoln, supported by me, we had to push back against the government. And if you read that bill, in a situation like that, the government can move in, take possession of those land. And it will be up to Lincoln to prove that he owns or he has right to that land. We have the situation in Moko Arcadia. Those two plantations were bought many years ago for some reason. The entire plantations, both plantations were not occupied. The residents concentrate on the northern portion of the plantation. Today, the government is trying to take possession of the southern part of those two plantations. And I can go on and on. And we have to be careful and we have to understand what is it government is doing. As the country develop in terms of infrastructure development and the road network, all the the prime land along these major highways. You can do a research. You will see who have possession of them. We know land is a major factor of production. And we, as Africans, we will have to defend what belongs to us. And we must not allow no one to dispossess us of our legacy. I want to encourage all citizens to be vigilant. If we have to be more aggressive to ensure that this bill does not materialize into any form of legislation, because if it does, we are in serious problem, because throughout the ancestral villages, we might very well find that we are dispossessed of what belongs to us. I want people to understand that. The
Well,
government has no good intention. Thank you.
thank you so much. No good intention at all. Lincoln, can you give us an update on what has happened with the lands out there at Kingley? Ancestral lands, of course, you have the evidence to back everything up, and you have been charged. In fact, how many charges? It says Lincoln Lewis Kingley villagers and assault, abusive charges, even though you're standing up and fighting for ancestral land. This is the evidence. Kojo McPherson land belonged to the Kojo McPherson clan. Yet Anil Nandalal is saying, "Hey, wait a minute, that he's saying that there's no record of any." And this is what they're coming. They're hiding the records, destroying the records possibly. We saw it recently with that land out there on that hotel, that Kotari Hotel. All manner of things. Give us an update. What is happening here? What's going through your mind?
Basically, what we did there is that we asked family to come in, those who are heirs of Kojo McPherson, occupy, because that was the intent of those people who preceded me, my great uncles and cousins and so forth. Their intention was to have family members occupy, while the generation after them may have dropped the ball. My generation, that what we decided on is that we're going to have people occupy. Like where, let me say to people, what we did, we never went and say push anybody off of any land, unlike what Nandalala said. We went and what we did was to occupy the unoccupied lands. And that's what we did. And have our families start to fence and put houses on them. Right? I know for a fact that I seen a transport of that land. I'm going to tell you this, Mark. I'm going to tell the nation tonight. There was a transport for this land. That transport was given. Godwin McPherson, God bless the dead, took the transport and handed it to Donald Robertson, because we had intended to do some work to evict people from the land. A few weeks after, Donald Robertson's office went up in flames, and the transport went with it. When we went to New Amsterdam to get a copy of the transport, they tore the page out of the book. So we know what these guys are up to. But let me just make this point, I want people to understand that this is not the plan of this government or the program is not for an individual targeting one or two individuals. it's a macro plan, like in Region 5, like in West Coast Bobbies, from a Barry going up. The lands, the prime lands that you can find on the southern side of the road are on what you call the railway embankment between the Abari River and the Borbis River. The prime land to prepare to grow food is there. They intend to run, they are building highways. Their intention is to run a road just where that railway embankment was, from Abari onto Rosignol. And those lands on both sides of the prime lands on both sides of the railway the new highway will be now handed to their courts. This bill is put there to treat with issues of that nature. And unless people mobilize and galvanize, they are going to lose their lands. I believe that we have people in West Coast Bobbies have to do something. You have to stand up for what is justly yours.
Thank you so much, Lincoln. You've got to stand up for justly what's yours. Jamal Aziz and others are saying that people need to stand up and push back on this bill. And I agree with Jamal Aziz. I agree with all the others. And Jamal, I know you're celebrating your wedding anniversary, 39 or 40 years. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But thank you so much. Guyanese need to take back Guyana from the PPPC. Ms. Thomas, you yourself you've had some issues, ancestral lands and all manner of things. What's happening with your situation?
Well, two things I'd like to say, Mark. One is what has happened with the situation, but also what we're doing, because I believe my family is developing a model that we can share. So my family, for example, the challenge is, if you take, for example, for you to get to the court, if the transport is not in your name, even though you have a right, you live on the land. For you to get to the court, first of all, you have to have what they call the locus standi. The court has to recognize that you are the rightful person to come before the court. No, the first thing, you have to get the money to get the lawyer to go to the court. And then if the judge decides that, no, you're not the rightful person to come before the court, then that matter can never get before the court. So that's one. The government is also aware that that if they take the land, they're aware of all of these issues. It will be difficult to get to the court if the title is not in your name. Let's say if it's in your great-great-grandfather's name. I'll tell you, in my case, my family, we have our transports are since the 1840s. I'm from Coverdon. And the first set of transports for Coverdon was distributed in 1841, 1842. Our transports were from 1842 onwards. So slavery was abolished in and this is where the government is being insensitive to the history of African-Guyanese. So slavery was abolished in 1838. And then by the 1841, the Coverdon started to get 1841, I think, or 1842. The first transports were given out, and so when you very often people say, "Oh, it's a Guyanese problem," but I'm making this a distinct African Guyanese problem because our East Indian brothers and sisters, they started to come here in 1838 when slavery was abolished. So by 1842, they had only spent about 3 years as indentured servants. So they did not necessarily have land ownership as against the Africans who were here for hundreds of years prior to that. So this is something that we also need to, very often people say, talk as Guyanese, but we also need to talk in terms of the different ethnic groups because of our history. That's a fact. And so the villages, yes. So from 1840, my family, nobody sought to upgrade ownership. Mark, ownership was never a discussion between us and our old people. I cannot remember having a discussion or any discussion, hearing any discussion in my family on both sides, my mom and my dad, about dad's family, about ownership. And so so from 1840, the first individual transports were in from 1840 was in the 2000s. So what it means, 100 and something years later, then some of my family members got individual transports for portions of lands on the estate. So when the bill talks about and I have 250 family members who are living on the estate at Coverdale. So if a few persons in the 2000s, so if let's assume that the government wants a piece of our land, and I'll tell you what, my family members recently, they've said, because we're now subdividing the land so that we can upgrade the ownership and update the ownership rather. And some of my family members have said to me recently that the persons in the government have said that we must not interfere with the backlands. Up to recently, one of my family member informed me that we should not interfere with the backlands until the government engineering team come and assess the lands. So I said that, look, these are private lands, these are our lands. So the government, while we are organizing the legal aspect of it, that has nothing to do with the government. When the government engineering team comes to assess the drainage, whatever, right? They can't tell us don't do anything with the backlands. But I'm just trying to tell you, I might have a little more information than my other family members may have, or in terms of how the government is operating and what may be driving them. So so I said to them, we're going ahead and do our subdivision. When the government's engineering team, when they come, they're going to do the assessment. But this is our private land. We own the land. So we're happy that the government engineering team will come and do the assessment. We're happy for the National Drainage and Irrigation people to come and assist us. We're very happy for that. But I think that it's an overreach for the government to say, don't do anything with the backlands until they do their assessment, right? That is an overreach. And so so what we are doing now in terms of my family, we are doing the subdivision. And I want to come to a specific court matter that we've had for 29 years now. I'm just trying to tell you the difficulty particularly when the land is not in your name. We have been in court since 1995. And the other challenge is the manipulations which happens in the court. So after 29 years, we are back in the court again, fighting for a piece of land at Coverdale. This is the first time in 29 years that after several matters were filed, that we were finally able to, the trial is going on now, I can't say too much, but this is the first time in 29 years that we were able to share with a court in Guyana, right? Or this is the second time since 1996, our side of the story. And so as I stood in the court about 2 weeks ago, sharing our side of the story, when I left the courtroom, I said to my cousin, justice feels good. The matter has not been determined as yet, but after 29 years, justice feels good. So but the point here is that the challenge in terms of if the matter is not in your name and somebody come on your piece of land, particularly if they have money, they can keep you in the court for 29 years and manipulate the system. So that is one. The other aspect I'd like to say is, what are we doing? So I have about 125 first cousins from both my mom and my dad's side. And on both sides, we have land. So to subdivide the land, so what we have done, and we've had a lot of issues, family and land, we have had a lot of issues. And so coming out of all of the issues, what we're doing now, we're saying, for example, if my great-grandfather, for example, had 5 children, and we have 20 acres of land. We're now subdividing the land equally among my great-grandfather's 5 children. So that would be 4 acres of land by the 5 persons. Those 5 persons may have, let's say, 2 children each. And so if each one of them get 5 acres, then they would further divide that 5 acres among their 2 children each. And so we have found a way to develop a model, I would say, as to how to address the issue. The other thing that we've done, and this is coming to the social economy aspect, another side of my family, what we did, we developed a company. And so what we have, family members will be shareholders in the company. And what we've said is that when you get your land, if you're going to sell your land, you have to put not you have to, but you should put 5% of the sale into the company. So one of the reasons why I find this bill at this time to be very offensive is that after 100 and something years, some of us African-Guyanese families, we're now trying to work through the complexities of land ownership and our land, and trying to develop a way so that this land can reduce poverty in our family and improve us or bring us up into the middle class. My other point on this is that, so what we've done, we've developed what we call a family poverty reduction strategy and a family business plan, a development plan, sorry. And as a part of the family poverty reduction strategy, central to this poverty reduction strategy and our business plan is the land. And so our goal is, we've just recently developed a plan, a 5-year plan from 2025 to 2030. And the objective is to reduce poverty in our family, or to create the conditions to reduce poverty. So instead of the government assisting families to work through this maze, when you starting with 125 people, multiply that by 5, and then that by 5, and then that by 5. So what you have among African Guyanese is that many of them just leave the land because it's so complex and complicated to even try to sort it out. And the government is aware of that. A lot of them have, like I said, they live on the land, but they don't have the ownership. So what the government is seeking to do with these amendments is to exploit those shortcomings that African Guyanese have, instead of trying to find solutions. I'd like to also say this before I close on this point. To the opposition, I'd like to make a proposal, and to the government too. So what we have done, we've actually developed a model to bring our family out of poverty and to bring them up into the middle class. The opposition, as a central point of elections is coming up, this can be a central key elections point, that in order to assist the African Guyanese, but Guyanese on a whole, because Guyanese on a whole who have lands, to bring them up to the middle class and to reduce poverty, include this, help assisting them with a program as it relates to their lands, include that in the national development strategy for the opposition. The government is in government now, so they have an opportunity to actually take this idea and do the reverse of what they're trying to do now. Instead of unequal wealth creation, they can do actual real poverty reduction. So what the opposition can do is, you can actually, when you can actually, whether you are in government or not, the African Guyanese, they have the land. What they need is leadership to help them to organize and to represent them. So you can use our model, help them to subdivide the land. Like I said, we developed the company, and some of the land will go into a trust for future generations. Or we can lease the land, and the money from the land that we lease will go into the trust. So what people need is practical ways as to how they can use the land. So Mark, by 2025, our goal is that our poverty must be reduced in our family, or we must create the conditions for them to come out of poverty and move them up into the middle class. Last point, I keep saying last point. The Guyanese economy is shaped like a triangle. At the apex, you have the wealthy. And then you have the shrinking middle class, and the broad lower class. What has happened since 2020 in particular, this apex is getting smaller. This bill here will further make the apex shape of the Guyanese economy, the apex here, smaller. If the government should then assist African Guyanese and Guyanese with organizing their lands, so that the lands can reduce poverty, help them to reduce poverty and bring them up into the middle class. What the government will be doing is changing the shape of the economy from a diamond-shaped from a triangular-shaped economy to a diamond-shaped economy. So what you will do very quickly is to bring a lot of people up from the base here to this middle here as middle in the middle class.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's almost 11 o'clock in Guyana. We're going until we can't go any longer. But Mr. Leland Saul, you once you headed the lands agency there in Guyana, the central housing and so forth. Uh, this approach by the current PPP regime is really to destroy African Guyanese, destroy their livelihood, destroy their economic the value of their lands, their properties, whatever. This bill is a direct attack against persons of African descent. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. What should citizens do to stop this
Mark,
bill from being passed?
this bill, it is indeed offensive, but I want to make a general statement before I answer that question, and in relation to the community where I grew up. You know, at the time of the abolition of slavery in 1938, during that time, when my ancestors walked off that plantation, they bought villages, and that is in the lower west coast of Berbice. Unfortunately, it was not until 1914 the governor appointed a land settlement officer, and the first transport was issued in 1921. Today, in the Belgium area, we still have many plots of lands that are in people name who are deceased. And instead of government helping us to bring those land into current person's name, what they are trying to do is to deny. And this bill, there's no intention. People can be and will be dispossessed of their lands. We have to remain vigilant. We have to go there. We have to inform people. But the most important thing is to ensure that this bill does not see the light of day. It must never become a piece of legislation. It must not. Therefore, we'll have to mobilize people. If we have to take to the streets to ensure that this bill does not become a piece of legislation, we will do it. As I speak to you, in El Dorado and Belgium a few years ago, the government expropriated some lands at the back there. They dug a canal, and they have not addressed that issue as yet. I am pursuing this matter. I have engaged the MMA, ADA, that is the Myconia Barry Agricultural Development Authority. That is the government agency that did that. They did not consult with us. We know government does not consult with anybody. They just do what they want. And so we are out of about 16 acres of land. Nobody spoke with us. That is transported land. Even though we would have engaged the agency that did that. And that is the way the government has been treating people. And more so, that is the way the government has been treating Afro-Guyanese. Because they would not go into either community and do and execute such acts. They will consult and so on. But when it comes to us, they treat us in any manner. And therefore, I think we have a responsibility also within our community to ensure that we address this issue of where people die intestate and to bring these lands into current people name. We have to work with those who are ignorant of the procedure, what to do to ensure it is being done. I mean, it's a part of our culture, it's our way of life, that we know that our maybe great-great-grandfather would have owned this, and therefore we have a right to it. But we cannot continue to live like that in today's society. We need to address those issues. And so those of us who have the knowledge, I call upon everyone, let us work together to address this problem. Let's remain vigilant. Let us ensure that this piece of bill does not become a legislation. We must apply adequate pressure and enough pressure on government. We have Mocha Arcadia. We have a set of lands, ancestral land at the back of Plaisance and throughout the East Coast. All these places, there is a threat to those lands, and we must defend it. We must defend our ancestors' legacy. We cannot allow the government to do what they want to do. And it brings me back to King Gillian every time I think about this issue. And Anil Nandlal and his aggressiveness and how he wants to misinform people that they can go there and it's state land and so on. They have no respect for the sweat of our ancestors and the struggle that they went through. We didn't come here voluntarily. We were captured. We were sold into slavery. We were brutalized on the plantation. But yes, still, at the end of that period, our ancestors recognized the need and the value in land, and so they pooled their resources and they bought villages. They developed communities that were viable. But today, instead of helping us, we have a government that seeks to emasculate us, to weaken us, and will do anything to deny us of our legacy. And we must push back. We must fight against such things. And I take my leave here for now.
Thank you so much. Must push back, must fight back. I noticed Egerton David is saying here, go to court and file action for redress. Action. How can you go to court and file action when Miss Thomas just said it's almost 20, nearly 30 years our matter has been
A generation, Mark, a whole generation.
In the court. It doesn't work. The court is the streets. Simple as that. Shut the place down. This bill should not pass because all of our lands, I have ancestral land, I have land from great-grandparents and so forth and so on, that is going to be affected because of these covetous, these criminals in office. I know, Ms. Thomas, you wanted to say something, but let's go to Lincoln, please. Let's give him because we don't want him to be left out. But before we get to Lincoln, let me remind you guys about this, what happened to Lincoln and his family. But Lincoln stood up.
Call the crew. You want
Let I push it. Yeah, push it down again. You put there. Push it.
I push it down.
Ahead.
I push it down.
Yeah.
You do what you want.
You just
No problem.
I do what you want. Yes.
Ahead.
And you do what you want.
Yes.
Me
you show me do me what.
Do what you
yes.
want. Do what you want. Huh? Do what I want.
Everybody, this and me. Right here, grandfather.
You grandfather?
Huh?
Where your grandfather come from?
Where you come from?
I come from here.
Where me come from, sir?
Well, let me tell you something. This originally bought by Kojomak. So when you buy white people, who's white people? Listen.
Lincoln, you mentioned that land is owned by your ancestor, Kojo McPherson. The people saying that Kojo McPherson a white man. What can be done to stop this nonsense with this bill, Lincoln? What?
The issue here, Mark, that they are not saying they don't own by Kojo McPherson. They are accepting that they own by Kojo McPherson. But when they're saying Kojo McPherson cannot be my great-great-grandfather because he's a white man. That's a rumor that has been peddled by a few of them. Let me tell you something. This issue here of ancestral land is more serious than many of us think of it. The issue of what the bill is doing is to strip us, not only is to strip us of any form of economic position that we can pursue. And it is for generations to come what they intend to do with generations to come. These guys have a program, they have a plan, and they get a program. How they are going to deal with first the Africans, secondly, the Amerindians, and thirdly, they are going to deal with the East Indians. Those East Indians who believe that they can ask for level or demand any level of independence. The same will be applied to them. Already in the Amerindian case, you see what is happening with the miners and them. Well, let me just bring you back to this. These are made a point, both Milan and Adriana. These lands, there are documents for these lands. We have documents. But they're running around and tell you that they don't have documents. We don't have documents. Even Anilala land, in the subsequent to his tirade, he talked to Ford and myself, Roysdale Ford, senior counsel, and myself. He said, let's sit and talk. You bring your documents, then we see how we can work this out. But I had to say to him that you have said already that the people get transport. And secondly, you are saying that it's not my ancestors who own it. They don't give transport to state lands. You don't get prescriptive rights to state land. These people get land through prescriptive rights. So it gotta be personal, private property. These people believe that people like me went to school only Sundays. But I can read and I can understand. I know what the motive is. There is more to this issue. And unless people come out and stand up, there is more to it than the lands. I'm not ready yet to blow the lid on the rest. You see how Trump and them have what you call Project 2025? There is a project. There is a project. And all you guys who running around and saying that we are getting a contract, when I finish with the contract, I hear nothing left. All that you can do is bite to beer at the corner. So, and a lot of people believe in that they big. Let me tell you something. Do not allow these people to dump all of us in the same barrel. Those who understand what is taking place, let us hold hands. Let us bond. Let us walk. Let us run. And if possible, let us fight them. These guys intend to bring you right back to immediately after slavery, when they freed Africans walked off the estate and they start to do their own economic project by way of farming. They flood the lands. In this case, they're not prepared to flood and they intend to take away the lands from all of us. And until such time that you guys understand this, what you're going to be doing is being passive and pushing your children and grandchildren down into a new economic subjugated program that economically down the road they can't raise their hand and do anything for themselves. That is the story now.
Thank you. People are saying enough is enough. The folks in Guyana have to stand up and fight against this bill. Protest in front of the parliament, wherever parliament is going to be held. Protest in your communities, of course, peaceful protest. Yes, it's okay. It's okay to stand up and say enough is enough. This bill should not be passed. Ms. Thomas, I know you were about to say something, but my apologies. Go right ahead. The floor is yours.
That's fine, Mark. I wanted to say that one, as a private citizen, as somebody who is concerned about this matter, I'm inviting other fellow citizens to come out in front of the parliament on Wednesday. This bill will be debated in parliament on Wednesday, this Wednesday coming, the 18th. Come out, we will hold hands on the parapet. So we're not going to obstruct traffic or anything. Let us come out and hold hands, come out in our numbers, and because while the parliamentarians are debating this matter, let the parliamentarians who will be debating on our behalf, more than likely the opposition parliamentarians, let them know that we have your backs. You going there and you going to parliament on Wednesday with your gloves on, your fatigues, and you fight on our behalf. And let us come out and stand up outside of the parliament. And this is the convention center. I'm not sure what time is parliament, but even if we have to be out there early, whole day, we stand up out there and hold hands. We line the streets. We can, if it's many of us, we can line the streets on both sides and send a message to the government that what we want is for our lands to be integrated in the national development strategy as a part of the government's poverty reduction program, and how to increase the middle class, and not as a part of their unequal wealth creation program. So I'm calling on Guyanese to come out on Wednesday. This is me, Adriana Thomas, calling on you, not as a part of any organization. Me calling. I will be out there, and let us send a message to the government. Let our parliamentarians know that you are fighting for us and we have your backs. And the other point I'd like to make is that, Mark, what this government is doing, this government is consistently breaking our feet and then telling the world that we don't know how to run or we can't run fast. Right? They break our feet and then they say, you see them? They can't run fast. They don't know how to run. Or how can we run when you're consistently breaking our feet, right? And let's go back to, you see, 2020. Let me tell you, when the government fired people in 2020, what they did, that was an attack on the middle class in Guyana, but particularly the African middle class. Because for all of those public servants who were in senior positions, who got fired, they had a driver taking the children to school. They had a babysitter. They had somebody coming to clean the yard who was getting paid. They had a helper. So for each one of them, so that they can do the work, they had about 4 persons working with them. And so what the government has done, they've fired a lot of those public servants for absolutely no reason. And so that was an attack on the African-Guyanese middle class. And so in addition to that, they have removed the African-Guyanese who were in decision-making positions, and they've replaced them with other people. So what you have is that people who were working for like $500,000 a month, $300,000 a month, you remove all that money from the Black community. Annually, when I did a calculation, the government, by firing all of those people, at least $720 million was taken away from the African-Guyanese community per year. due to the firing of public servants that happened in 2020. So that was one thing that happened. And then what you see now, you see that African Guyanese are not qualified for the big contracts because they wouldn't qualify because they don't have the equipment, etc. They don't have the capital for oil blocks. We've seen a few African people who get oil blocks. And so then what we saw is and then we've seen consistently, now the government is distributing the 100,000 cash grant. Imagine when you look at, there was this young man at GGMC who negotiated ExxonMobil for, what was it, a 214 million US dollars. He got 2 weeks, I think, no pay leave. He was sent on 2 weeks no pay leave, right? When for negotiating 214 million US dollars, right? And then you so we see that. We saw they take the sugar company, for example. The sugar company is now producing 3 times or 2 times less sugar than was being produced under the APNU and AFC government. I said 3 to 4 times sometimes less, right? And what do you see? You see people who are being elevated. So what the government is doing, and so for some, a lot of those people who were fired in 2020, if you have a master's degree in public administration, where else are you going to work except in the public sector? And so a lot of those people, right, are out there not being able to use their talent and their expertise in a meaningful way, while we see our country, while they see their country falling apart. I say we see because I was fired too, right? And the other thing I want to say, because I was fired from School for writing a letter in the press. And so I was fired for writing a letter in the press in support of Roxanne Myers and the other Lowenfield and Mr. Mingo at the Elections Commission, when I said that for the police, the police force and the DPP to what they're doing was illegal, because what the law says, as a matter of fact, the Human Rights Declaration says, as well as the Constitution, that these people must have a fair hearing. So I got fired for writing that letter, even though I have a master's degree in jurisprudence, in rule of law. That's what I studied, to fight for the rights of people. While Bobby Josai from GGMC negotiated with ExxonMobil $214 million, and he was sent on 2 weeks leave, and I learned that he's somewhere doing his master's degree, or his PhD rather. I'm just sharing with you what has been happening. This here is another attempt by the government to break the feet of African Guyanese. Mark, as you walk around Guyana and you see African community, if you're a foreigner, you've never been to Guyana before, or I guess the people from the international community, the perception they have of African Guyanese is that we're ambitious. These are a bunch of people who have no ambition, right? It's one out of 2 things. It's either they're unambitious or they're under a very discriminatory and oppressive system. It is the latter. We are under a very oppressive and discriminatory system. What the diplomatic community is not seeing, they're probably seeing our profile, this portrait at the top, but they're not seeing how the government is breaking our legs. They would either send the GRA after you, they would either send, they fire people, they say they're not putting the representatives from the opposition on government boards because the vice president is saying that they're going to delay things and they're going to obstruct things. What all of that is doing is consistently breaking our legs. So here we are as African Guyanese in Guyana crawling, and I'm not exaggerating, it's literal. So we're crawling because, and as soon as we try to get back on our feet, the government finds another way to break our legs again. And so that's the graphic way I can put the situation that we have in Guyana. And so to wrap this point up is where very often, like someone said to me that somebody came to Guyana, a foreigner, and he said, where is the poverty? I'm not seeing any poverty. Where is the discrimination that they're talking about? Where is the you're not seeing it? That's because you're not seeing the government breaking our legs at the bottom here, right? And so something has to give, Mark. something has to give. You know, I often wonder, we were taught so much about human rights and we were taught so much about rule of law. And I'm thinking, you know, something that hurt me, I'll say it here, it hurt me when Prime Minister Modi came and said that Mr. Ramatar, Mr. Jagdeo, and President Ali are ambassadors. And I'm thinking, I never rob nobody. I never thief anybody. I go to my church, try to live right, do what is right, pay my taxes. Once I got a job, many Guyanese, right? And I'm saying that how can you come with a value? The vice president showed up for the first time with 2 girl children to meet with the Prime Minister of India. That was the first time that this nation was aware that the vice president had children. You understand? And I'm saying, so when the Prime Minister of India said that that the vice president is an ambassador, essentially what he is saying, I think it's who it was, Aristotle, that said a good person is a good citizen. What when you say things like those, what I am thinking is that Prime Minister Modi is not understanding that I ain't got no legs. The government is breaking my legs, so I am crawling, right? And the same government that you're saying is their ambassadors. You understand? When President Ali got an award as one of the top Indian people, I think this was when they had that Mocha incident. The day when same week, President Ali got that award from, I think it was an Indian organization somewhere, that he is one of the top Indians. The same day, they were burying, the same week rather, they were burying people, animals, and knocking down their houses in Mocha. And we look at these things, and I ask myself, as a Black person, do I have value? As a Black people in Guyana, do we have value? Because while the president is breaking down people's homes and burying their animals and beating up our women, the president is getting an international award as a top Indian person globally. And I'm saying something is wrong with our society today. The value, we place the value on the position that the president has. The value is placed on the what Prime Minister Modi did. He put the value on the position that Donald Ramatar has. He put the value on the position that the vice president has. He put the value on the position that President Ali has. But what about the real value of the people of this country who every day go about their business honestly, try to do an honest, make an honest contribution to their country? And so I'm saying, Mark, that something, what am I saying? I'm saying to the international community, we are suffering in Guyana. And we are suffering in Guyana. And even if you have not heard our cries before, I'm saying on behalf of the people at Mocha, on behalf of the people at Linden whose homes were broken down, on behalf of the people at Success, on behalf of the people at Perico, on behalf of the African-Guyanese who are now fighting to maintain the last piece of thing that they have that can get them out of poverty. I'm saying that you need to pay attention to what is happening in Guyana and stop focusing on the pageantry. Really focus on our human rights. Really focus on our natural justice, and really focus on our rights.
Thank you so much. Well said. Leadership matters too. Time for the opposition to up their games. Some people in the audience will suck their teeth, but it is reality. Up your games. Now is not time to send mixed signals to people that they don't believe in protests or whatever. Protest is what going to move this corrupt PPP regime. Protest. So go out there on Wednesday. If you can't make it on Wednesday, if you got to shut down your area, just shut it down. It's perfectly legal. It's your constitutional rights. But action is needed by the opposition and leadership is needed as well.
Oh, Jesus Christ. If cost of living double, I don't know what happened. A pound of sugar is $300 already. Flour, everything gone up. Everything just raising. You gotta get about $40,000 for buy good ration. You gotta get 3 man now.
I can't take it no more. I can't take it.
Look, check it. 2 more things. See that? Look, she's running with the food. She's running with it. She's running, yeah. Good. Sandrine, you should never do that to them. Why you say that?
Because I don't right now, look, because listen, the whole thing is that, right?
You don't mind a video, right?
No.
Forget about her, calling people hungry belly and all manner of things. Closing remarks, guys. As we look at the time, Leland, African Guyanese need a way forward. This is obvious discrimination against persons of African descent. And of course, those of our Indian brothers and sisters who do not support this corrupt regime and our indigenous brothers and others, they are also faced with discrimination. But the bulk of discrimination is directed towards persons of African descent. The reason for this land, this acquisition bill, is to take away lands that are owned by African Guyanese. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's got to be stopped one way or the other legally. Closing remarks, please, Mr. Saul. Your microphone, please, sir. Thank you.
Sorry. I said it's important that I address the statement made by Prime Minister Modi. I think it's most offensive. And I asked myself why he made that statement. Guyana is a multi-ethnic society. We're a plural society. And I am surprised that he does not know about our history and our struggle. You know, I have received credible information leading up to the visit of Prime Minister Modi. There was a meeting. And from our government, it is their desire to invite about 600 businesses or business people to start up new businesses in Guyana. And the question was asked where these people will come from. And it was proposed that the majority will come from India, about 400 and 200 from China. And someone there asked, why are you not inviting other people, European, African? They said, no, Indians and Chinese only. We have to be very, very careful. I say that because for me, as I said before, there's a deliberate attempt to weaken the Black race in Guyana. And we have to be conscious about it. We must demand an equal space in this country. We must demand a place at the table. And the opposition must be more aggressive. We need to see strong leadership coming from the opposition. Because the bottom line is, the leader of the opposition, whosoever sits in Congress, please, our country is divided along racial lines. Let us not fool ourselves. And whosoever sits in Congress, place as a leader, is seen as a leader of the Black race in Guyana. And whosoever that person is, must show leadership, must stand against all form of injustices. And this bill, we must rally against this bill. Because should this bill, as I said before, pass, it will further weaken African Guyanese. They will take our lands. They will take it. And we cannot allow that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saul. Lincoln Lewis, your closing remarks, please. as to the way forward. This bill should not be passed. Your closing remarks.
We have to do something that is dramatic. And let this be the beginning of this struggle. We cannot be passive any longer on these issues that confront the communities. And this bill will affect every group in society. As I said earlier, that look, the East Indians who want to resist this government at any point, we will come for them, come for their lands too. So all of us are seen as dangerous species in this entire field. Leland made a point earlier. I didn't know he get the information. Well, I get the information 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, just when Modi was coming in. So, and it confirms Modi's statement after he returned to India to how he described Guyana. Let me tell you something. I said earlier, these people have a plan and a program like what they have in the United States, the Republicans get in the United States. These people saying that they want companies to meet the level of what you call Fortune 2000, top class companies. They intend that in the shortest possible time, they must have 500. 350 must be East Indians, and 150 must be Chinese. So in this big equation, or in their plans, there's nothing for the African man but crumbs under the table. My problem is not them who conceptualize and develop it. My problem goes to the point where those men and women who of other races who are sitting down there and decide that they are going to move people back from where they were, subjugate them at a lower level. We have to take note of that. We have to deal with these men and women condignly. Call on you brothers and sisters who run in to say, oh, that person is a nice person and that person. Let me tell you what. They're only nice. Consider them only nice when they are prepared to put systems in place that all your brothers and sisters can have a better treatment, be treated equally, and benefit from the largest of this country. To do otherwise is that you are aiding and abetting your own subjugation and pushing your children and grandchildren further down the economic ladder. This is not about today, it's a long haul, and we all have to remember that. If either you stand up for something or you fall for any damn thing. Good night, Mark, Adriana, Leland, and the viewers.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we will see thousands. I notice Egerton is saying 200. 200 is nothing. Congress Place alone, the leadership at Congress Place should bring out at least 2,000 and let others just fall. We must stop pussyfooting around, guys. Stop the nonsense. Leadership matters. It's your first time on Bench Up Radio 107.1 FM. Your closing remarks. Keep in mind, Lincoln is falling asleep.
Okay, I'll be brief, Mark. I just want to say, Mark, I thank you because the idea is to create greater awareness and to raise the consciousness among people about, one, the bill, but also about the wider implications of this bill. So I'd like to invite people to come out on Wednesday outside of my Parliament. I'm not sure what time Parliament is on Wednesday, and let us support our parliamentarians. And in terms of the way forward, what we're also hoping that the parliamentarians would do, in the bill it has for the minister to determine the compensation. So I heard Member of Parliament Ganesh Mahipur, he was saying that they will propose for a tribunal to determine that. So those are good points that the opposition are coming up with. So let us go out and support them. To my brother Lincoln and my brother Leon Saul, and to you, Mark. There's a saying that evil thrive where good men and women do nothing. So let us, those of us who are the good ones, let us do something so that the evil in our society will not continue to thrive.
Well said. Hope those who eat in the crumbs and eat in the bread will know that their day will come as well. They're not safe by this bill at all. The bill must be stopped by every legal means necessary. It's got to stop. Go out there on Wednesday in your numbers. If you can't make it out on Wednesday.
Mark,
yes, sir.
Let me tell you, I'm hearing you, but this is where we are parting ways. In a struggle, whatever necessary must be used to bring an end. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. That's Lincoln's way of putting it. People have their constitutional right to go out and do what is necessary through constitutional means. Their constitutional rights, whatever necessary, however they interpret that to be. But thank you all so much, and of course peacefully, because that's what we spread right here on 107.1.
Yes, peacefully. Peaceful
Right, because you know the Pacus will jump and say people saying this. Oh, we're using the word peaceful. We're not saying peaceful.
No, peaceful protest. Mark, I just like to share a joke with you before I go. So I met an elderly woman in the street, and just to tell you, this is another level of fight. So she said to me, I recognize your face, right? She said, y'all keep up the fight. I read in Psalms 109 for them. So I had to go and read Psalms 109. When I read Psalms 109, I would say, if you are a leader and somebody said to you, I am reading Psalms 109 for you, get your act together. Mark, go and read Psalms 109. Lincoln and Leon. And when you read it,
Lincoln, tell us Psalms 109.
Pardon?
Tell Lincoln.
Lincoln, what is it? Psalm 109.
Tell us, Lincoln. Come on, hold not your peace. Come on, Lincoln. Hold not thy peace.
I think Lincoln is frozen.
No.
Oh, he's going to sleep.
Psalm 109 got him frozen. But if they don't let them read Ephesians, was it 6, chapter 6? We fight against not flesh and blood, but against principalities and wickedness. Wickedness in high places. The people have to stand up and fight against wickedness in high places. Wickedness. That is what it's about. Thank you all so much. Let's see what the number is going to be like on Wednesday. And hopefully nobody is going to say they don't believe in protest or protest can't. Protest is the only one of the main ingredients in standing up against an oppressor or oppressive regime. Thank you so much. Don't be a stranger, Miss Thomas. The people appreciate you. We appreciate you too.
Once you invite me, Mark, I'm going to make the time to come on the program. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Leland. We noticed you lean back. That's
going
okay.
To sleep. He's going to sleep.
Thank you all so much, guys.
Thank
And
you, listeners.
to our listeners, thank
Panelists,
you all.
good night. Good night.
Thank you all
Nathan,
so
my
much.
dear brother. Good night.
Yeah, you knock out.
Good night.
All right, guys, we got to stand up. You've got to stand up, and by every constitutional means, guys. We're out of here. God bless you.
Bless you,
Bye-bye.
Mark. Bye-bye.
Come on, put down, white man. Bring the police. Cut him out, turn out. Who?
Mama Jesus Christ, the demon is there.
All right. Hello. Hi. So you got yes.
So far, you see nothing.
Watch your right. Watch your right.
Okay, I put the propaganda. Hey, you get
Propaganda? Propaganda get you right there.
Hey, those two fucking boys are my understand. Okay, land when you're dead, I want cats to go. So why you come for it? So why you come for it?
Because I bring you some cow here.
You not bringing cow here. You are bringing cow here. You are bringing cow here. I want to tell you this. You know, your family come and meet me. Meet my family.
Oh, that's
right? I'm saying they come and meet me. Me to come from East Bank. Me to come from here. Not for food. Right? Let me tell you something. Not to come here and marry the Razir. You know that? Let me tell you, marry the Razir. You don't understand it.
You can't fight for us all them years.
Oh, you don't give me any one.
So much year this land I never
grandfather, father, mother born here.
What? They just look how much
Me born and grow here too. But I don't know you. You don't know me. Me don't know you. Me don't know you. But because you don't know me, I know you know me today. You don't make me know me. You don't make me know me. But what do you want to do? What do you want to do? That's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. I want to tell you something. I want to tell you something. You expect something.
look at Danny. Damn it. And that's why I think that's how you bring a great man out of power. People like you. Because how you're going on in half. And the man never has to hate nobody. That's how you're going with rationalness. Rationalness how you're going with.
This is race.
Yes.
This is race when you can't get your way. Yeah. When you cannot get your way, it's race. Yeah.
And you race when you cannot get the other night.
The race when you can't get. I have said so. Yes. It's race when you can't get your way. You understand me? When you can't get your way, it becomes race. Yeah. You don't become any longer of pony types. You become don't get away from in front of you.
Get away with push me now.
I don't push you. Why don't push you?
Push me now.
Why don't push you? I don't believe in abusing women. I don't believe in abusing women. I don't believe in you abusing women.
I can't take it no more. I can't take it no more. Can't take it no more. Imagine 18 hours of blackout and you're telling people progress. Cost of living gone up 100%. Yet you give public servant less. Mr. President, listen to the people. Search your soul and